been some news. It's been very exciting for us here at Tour Chicken Nuggets. We usually do playthroughs and things like that. We don't really touch on news topics and things like that. As you may notice, our first playthrough was Pokemon Gold. And as I've said at this point approximately about 5 million times, Gold was my first Pokemon game and it is my favorite Pokemon game. And rather fortuitously, the news that has come out directly involves Pokemon Gold. Spaceworld Demo showed us a lot of things that could have been in Pokemon. That includes different sprites, different evolutions, different items, different moves. And in my mind, the first thing that triggered was, what does this mean for the metagame? So we're going to speculate about stats, we're going to talk about what these Pokemon's roles would be in different teams, and we're going to talk a little bit about these Pokemon's origins. Dynavir, the dynamite Pokemon. It can heat the pads of its paws to leave trails of embers to deter any pursuers. Should it need to battle, its mane can ignite the air surrounding it and cause volatile explosions. 5 starters in Gen 2. I have a very strong opinion about this. Typhlosion is my favorite starter out of every Pokemon, and seeing this bear thing in front of me just offends me. Just a little bit. Regardless of my bias, I have to be honest, it is a pretty cool design. If you look at it, it's basically a brown bear slash foo dog type thing. With some research you'll find out that it's most likely based on a brown Japanese bear, the same thing that Ursaring is based on, apart from the whole connection to astrology with Ursa Major, which would make a lot of sense, considering that they both, thus Dynavir and Ursaring, introduced in Gen 2. Looking at the stats I gave it, it's not too different from Typhlosion, in that it has a dedicated attacking stat and fairly decent speed, capped the base stat total at 534. The main difference is that it has a notably higher HP stat than what Typhlosion has. I think this makes logical sense considering how bulky this Pokemon looks. The high speed is of course because bears are pretty fast. Anyone could kind of find that out for themselves. I named it the Dynamite Pokemon for obvious reasons, and as you can see, he's quite a hefty boy. The abilities are Blaze and Quick Feet. If I'm being 100% honest with you, Quick Feet, I just kinda stole that from Ursaring. But I mean, I wouldn't complain about that. It's not a bad ability, and if you look at the moves I've given it, you'll see that Quick Feet is actually quite a decent ability paired with some basic fire type attacks. As you can see, there are only 2 basic archetypes I've highlighted for this Pokemon's moveset. 2 special attacking sets, 2 physical attacking sets. As you can see, its defensive stats aren't really conducive for a more bulky or tankier set, so I think the only logical step for Dynavir is this form of sweeper. On the special attacking side, I have a spec set, max speed, max attack, fairly basic, although I have added an element of mixed attacking with Facade. Because of course if you're using Quick Feet, you're going to make use of the Toxic Orb. And with its fairly decent physical attack set, even on a special attacking set, Facade is going to hit pretty hard. The 2 items I've highlighted for it are the obvious Toxic Orb or Choice Specs. Physical attacking sets aren't too different from that. You swap out the Choice Specs for Choice Band, and you swap out Ovid or Fire Blast for Flare Blitz and Superpower. I've also added the option of Explosion. The reason I give it Explosion is, well, it is the Dynamite Pokemon. It would be kinda silly if it didn't learn Explosion or Self-Destruct. And I mean, Choice Banded Explosion, coming from base 1-1-2 physical attack, that isn't bad utility late game. Other set, the requisite Toxic Orb. Ultimately, I think this Pokemon would fit into most balanced teams. Where I think it will tier? Probably not too much higher than UU. RU, if I'm being realistic, don't see it flourishing in OU. Turban, the Turban Pokemon. Turban detaches itself from Slowbro and Slowking after they die. Its mannerisms and natures become less like the shoulder it once was, adopting personality traits from its former host. The sprite that had a lot of people talking was Turban. That's because nobody really thought of this as its own Pokemon. It's always been a part of Slowking's crown or Slowpoke's tail. I'm really interested and intrigued by what sort of direction they were going to go with this. Was it going to be as strong as Slowpoke or Slowking, or was it just going to be a throwaway Pokemon? Regardless, I thought it necessary to give it a proper Pokédex entry and perhaps some stats. Turban is a turban. That's something that's worn by the Sikh people as a religious statement and by Sufi scholars. Sufi being a sect of Islam. The thing about turban as a turban, like an actual turban, is that it indicates some form of knowledgeability, but it's just a shell, so I don't really see it having any form of intellect like Slowking does. The stats I gave it are very straightforward. Threw everything into defense and nowhere else really. I don't see this Pokemon tiering really, probably PU, RU at best. A modest base 430 with not so modest defensive stats. I gave it the very obvious ability of shell armor, and the only role I could really see this fulfilling on a team is an extremely low tier defensive set. I can imagine it gets access to spikes, maybe stealth rock, and certain Slowbro and Slowking moves such as Calm Mind, Amnesia or Magic Coat, thus giving it a niche for certain setup applicability and maybe a setup sweeper. Subomito, the flycatcher Pokemon. Unlike its counterpart Victory Ball, Subomito prefers solitude and does not interact with other beings, even of its own species. It maintains docility as long as it remains isolated. Design-wise, there isn't really much I can say about Subomito that hasn't already been said about Victory Ball about, what's it now, 24 years ago? So, other than any basic elements of a plant, Subomito is essentially just an Nepenthes, as Victory Ball is. Because of the split evolution from Victory Ball, I'm immediately reminded of Bellossom and Vileplume. The difference between the two of them is that Vileplume is a defensive mon and Bellossom is more offensive mon. So applying that logic, we can assume that since Victory Ball is an offensive mon, Subomito was planned to be a defensive mon, which you can see by the stats I've given it. Subomito could be quite a decent wall or utility Pokemon. Based on its typing, I would say it would fulfill a very similar role to a Mungus and a Lolomak, especially if you consider giving it Poison Touch. The stats I've given it would be very conducive to a Spadef wall, perhaps even a mixed wall. Base 88 defense paired with 110 HP paired with 109 Spadef, you're looking at a very well-rounded defensive wall. The two sets I've given it are basically stolen from a Mungus, that goes right down to the Eevee spread. Essentially they would have the exact same checks and counters, the only difference is you would need to tweak the spreads based on stats, and to be honest I wasn't prepared to do those calcs. If you look at the Assault Vest set, I've given it a full complement of Giga Drain, Sludge Bomb, Clear Smog and Hidden Power Fire. If you were to swap out the Assault Vest for Black Sludge and make a more general defensive set, you could probably swap out Hidden Fire for Strength Sap, in the same way that you would for a Mungus. My other dedicated Assault Vest set takes into play its physical attack stat, giving it a little bit of investment in physical attack with the Adamant nature, and then allowing it to have knockoff, leaf blade, poison jab and leech life could mean the usage of quite a decent utility mon, a great pivot switch. I could imagine this being paired with the finest of stall teams. I'm talking the finest. This thing would essentially be the Mungus of its time, maybe even a little bit better, most likely a little bit worse because it doesn't have Regenerator. I could see this thing tearing, possibly in OU, more likely BL or UU. Kionpan, the panda doll Pokemon. Kionpan conceal themselves amongst dolls and stuffed animals. When an unsuspecting victim passes by, its spirit latches onto them, draining their life force until it has had its fill. No matter what culture you explore, dolls are creepy. Japan is no exception to this, and that is unfortunately why we have Norawara. The name literally means cursed doll, and it's essentially a Japanese voodoo doll called Wara Ningyu. These dolls form a part of Japanese occult principles of Onmyodo, which are based on the Chinese 5 elements of Wuxing. According to the cutting room floor, Norawara evolves into Kionpan at level 1. This is most likely due to it being in beta, but let's humor my speculation. I think this implies something about their stats and moves. So, picture the situation, you catch a Norawara and all it knows is curse, for example. It's maybe level 17 or 18 or something. You see the stats, pretty bad, like a Magikarp, but you push on, like you would with a Magikarp. It evolves immediately and you get Kionpan. The stats go up massively level after level, but it doesn't learn any new moves. What if they made it so that it only learns moves as Norawara? That would force you to keep it at such until you have a desired moveset. So, similar in concept to how you'd grind a Magikarp after level 20 with its audible stats, you grind a Norawara until you have an actual useful moveset. The stat spread I gave Kionpan would make it seem as though this Pokemon comes out of Sun and Moon. The reason I say that is because it has extremely high stats juxtaposed with extremely low stats. I would picture that Norawara would have very, very low base stats. I'm talking base 150, 200-ish. With Kionpan, you go all the way up to a very respectable base 465 with extremely high physical and special attack. Attack clocking in at slightly higher than its special attack, and absolutely useless defenses and HP. Cursed Body just seems like it's appropriate, and the moveset is, well, fairly predictable for this kind of Pokemon. Due to its fairly high attacking stats, I feel that you could run a dedicated special attacking, dedicated physical attacking, or a full-on mixed attacking set. Highlighted here is the special attacking set, with a very basic move pool of Shadow Ball and Leech Life paired with Substitute and Nasty Plot. This is a dangerous combination if used correctly, and I feel like with this sort of set, this Pokemon might tear all the way up to the OU. The physical attacking set, I decided to mix things up and use a Choice Band. Choice Band paired with Jolly Nature and Trick, Phantom Force, Shadow Sneak and Knockoff, with the option of Drain Punch, and tearing through any and every wall. Gurotesu, the eel shark Pokemon. Horrifically ugly, Gurotesu deters most of its prey on sight. It uses the lure attached to its head to attract unsuspecting Pokemon and snaps towards them at great speed, swallowing its prey whole. I think it's appropriate to end the video on what I think is the heavy hitter of the league. Most people saw the sprite for Ikari, this shark thing with an anchor strapped to its tail, and they thought, yes, that's a Pokemon. And I thought the same thing. It's just a cool concept. I mean, looking back in history, there's always been a connection between sharks and anchors in sailor culture, more specifically sailor tattoos. But then, you spy this thing below it. Why does Ikari evolve into an embodiment of an underbite? And why is it so grotesque? A quick Google search and you'll find the frilled shark. The ugliest thing to ever defile God's gift of sight. So looking at this wonderful selection of Pokemon, we can essentially think of them as a 3-stage Sharpedo with a little bit of Gorbis and Huntail thrown in. And my friends, I think that makes for a very potent combination. So now, as I break with the form of this video, I do so in the same way that I believe this Pokemon will completely break the realms of the metagame. Base 100 HP, base 135 physical attack, base 40 defense, base 70 special attack, base 55 speed def, and base 110 speed to come to a total of 510. A modest 510. The abilities of Intimidate and Strong Jaw, which, as you shall now see, will prove to make Gudotesu the strongest addition to your team since Mewtwo. I would usually mention all the different archetypes for this Pokemon. You don't need archetypes with Gudotesu. Where he's going, you don't need items. Doesn't matter what you throw on this thing. Life Orb, Leftovers, Choice Band, or Choice Scarf as I have highlighted here for you. It will tear through absolutely everything. Give it a jolly nature, give it an adamant nature for all I care. When you pair this thing with a move combination in any degree of one Fang move and one Water type move, one Steel type move, and whatever the hell you want to throw on for a fourth move, it simply doesn't matter what your opponent sends out. You're going to beat it. You see, I've tried to be realistic with all the previous Pokemon and their stats, but I just get this vibe from this disgusting, horrible thing that it doesn't care about being realistic. It just wants to eat you, and your children, and your children's Pokemon. Ultimately, we won't really know what these Pokemon could have performed like in the modern game. I do however think it's cool to think about what could have been and what can be in Pokemon had a few things changed in its history. So, let me know in the comments, what do you think of these sets? Do you think I've completely lost the plot? Do you think that I didn't give fair enough stats? Do you think my stats were on point and perfect? Either way, I want you to tell me. Also, please tell me if there's any other Pokemon in the demo that you'd like me to speculate on. And in fact, if there's any speculations that you have had, tell me about that too. This has been me, one half of Chicken Nuggets. I'll see you in the next video.